that the session will be recorded, so please kindly raise your hand if you have any objection to this. I will now hand over to the SANRAL team who will begin the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. As introduced, I'm Andrew McKellar, and I'm on the engineering team as part of infrastructure asset management. So I'll be starting off with the presentation just from the technical SANRAL point of view, and then my colleagues from our finance department will give you more of the financial information. Right. So South Africa has the 11th longest paved road network, has the longest road network in the world and the 19th longest paved network. And we obviously need to maintain this infrastructure. That's our mandate as the South African National Roads Agency. But this is one of the key drivers that keeps an economy running in terms of being able to transport goods from one place to another. And maintaining this network comes at a cost. Right, so in terms of the breakdown of South Africa's road network, SANRAL is responsible for 22,000 kilometers of the total road network, but the total road network comes to the total proclaimed road network comes to close on 600,000 kilometers. SANRAL, although our network only represents 3.6% of the total proclaimed road network, it carries 34.5% of the annual vehicle kilometers traveled. So more than 70% of long distance freight is transported on the SANRAL road network. So although it's a smaller percentage, it's the key route is the key strategic routes that SANRAL is taking care of. So if we look at the trend in pavement conditions since the SANRAL's formation in 1998, we can see how things have changed over time. And so currently we're looking at about 1,400 kilometers, or 6% of our road network that is in a poor to very poor surfacing condition. And that is well within the international norm of 10% for a well-maintained road network. Right, so and that is really due to our preventive maintenance strategy that we use at SANRAL. In order to achieve this, we have a in-house asset management system that is aligned to ISO 55000, and we use this for life cycle modeling, life cycle cost analysis, and then and for our project prioritization. So again, just in terms of transportation and South African road use, we're looking at about, in terms of the State of Logistics Survey 2014, we're looking at about 88% of tonnage transported is happening by road versus the remainder by rail. And if we look at that in terms of breakdown in terms of person trips, we're looking at about 93% of person trips happening by road transportation, be that private car or maybe public transport. In terms of life cycle costing, we look at road user cost, and that drives the benefit of investing in road infrastructure and maintaining road infrastructure. So if we look at this chart, we see that as road roughness, which is a good indicator of road condition, as that increases, the road is essentially decreasing in quality, and therefore the road agency cost. If we let the road roughness increase, our cost goes down because we're spending less money on maintenance. However, road user cost, which accounts for about 90% of the total life cycle transportation cost, that increases drastically. And what we're looking for is the minimum total cost for the whole system. Okay, so in terms of SANRAL's road network, we are looking at, we've got dual carriageway roads, we've got 4-lane undivided roads, and 2-lane single carriageway roads. And we can see the breakdown in terms of 87% of the network is funded by non-toll, So that is funded by grants from Treasury, and the balance of 13% of the roads are funded by toll funding, of which 7% of those are managed directly by SANRAL, and 6% of those are managed by private companies under concessions. So that is the breakdown in terms of the funding and the different splits in road networks. Right, so in terms of the toll budget, we're looking at about just under 3,000 kilometers of toll road. Obviously, those are funded through bonds and loans from the capital market, and the revenue received is then used in terms of repaying those loans, as well as paying for the maintenance of the roads. And then we've got about, as I say, there's a borrowing limit there, and we've also got there's about 1,200 roads under the concession agreements. In terms of the non-toll budget, those are funded exclusively from the Treasury grants, and there's no borrowing allowed. And you can see the breakdowns for the years projected past and going forward. The toll portfolio is severely constrained over the medium term due to the non-resolution of the GFIB e-tolls, and we're seeing a bit of a surplus in terms of the non-toll portfolio, which I will explain a little bit later on. Okay, so the state has limited. The state has limited financial capacity to fund new road projects. Roads that carry a high volume of traffic can be tolled to provide a revenue stream, which can be borrowed against. However, there is obviously there is a cutoff at which there's a cost of collection. So there's a point at which below which traffic volume it is not feasible to toll a road. So there's a practical limitation there. Some of these expansion projects are to a value of about 150 billion, and we'll have a breakdown in the next slide of those. Right, and I think that one of our big challenges is the lack of clear road funding policy. And there's a huge amount of negative sentiment towards toll roads created by the non-resolution of the e-toll project. So as a result, new toll roads are not really at this point a viable option until we have clarity going forward. However, the current toll roads where the boom down is happening are working very well. Okay. And then there's critical upgrades that are required on the N2 and N3 corridors for the functioning of the national economy, and SANRAL has been left with no other option than to use non-toll funding in order to upgrade these portions of the network. But this does mean that we then have less money to spend on other lower traffic volume roads. All right. So here's the breakdown of toll projects which have been delayed, and we can see the breakdown in terms of the capital costs, the length of road that would be affected, as well as the job opportunities that would be created by letting these go, by having funding to make these go forward. So some of the big ones are the N2 Wild Coast, the N2 Durban South to North, the N3 Pietermaritzburg to Durban, the N4 PWV3 extension, that's near Hartbeespoort Dam, as well as the R72 N2 Port Elizabeth East London routes. So here we see a chart of SANRAL's funding trend, and I think the big impact there is the non-resolution of the e-toll issue, that is negatively impacting the ability to really go forward with upgrades and extensions of the toll network. Right, in terms of flagship projects, there are improvements on the Huguenot Tunnel, which is reaching capacity, and the second bore, the second tunnel needs to be implemented. The R573 Malotto Road improvements, the N1 North upgrade Bela Bela to Bright Bridge, basically improving the capacity of that corridor. The N2, N3 around Durban, the N2 Strand, realigning the corridor there for, where there is quite a bottleneck, and then of the N2 Wild Coast construction. This is the non-toll projected budget, with basically a maintenance to capex ratio of about 45-55. The key focus is really on trying to catch up with the underspent funds that were caused by regulations that slowed us down from completing projects or starting projects. This is the same one, but for the toll portfolio. And we are seeing a very constrained capex program due to the previously mentioned e-toll situation. There's been a big loss of funding opportunity because of the non-approval of the guarantee and borrowing limit. Again, waiting on the resolution from Cabinet on the e-toll issue. So as mentioned, there were issues in terms of regulatory problems that delayed SANRAL's rollout of projects and therefore expenditure. And this just shows the impact on expenditure. And the reason for the pause or the delays was because of the National Treasury regulations, where there was not clarity on the definition of local suppliers, and the requirement for subcontracting to be in place at the close of main tender. And this was one of the main causes, as well as the associated site stoppages that affected quite a few of our projects. So that is a backlog that we are working to catch up on. This is the project pipeline going forward, so we can see the breakdown of toll, non-toll, and total. We've got basically we've got about 1,180 tenders that need to go out in the next 3 years. So that means we've got to award about 393 projects per year to achieve that goal, or tenders we've got to award. And the regulatory process is fairly stringent, and therefore it's going to be a challenge to that. In 2021, we managed toward 193 projects, so we need to up that number by quite a significant margin. So all our tenders go out on the National Treasury e-tender portal, as well as the SANRAL website, and that is where our tenders are advertised and are available to the public. Siyabonga, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Siyabonga. I'm the Treasury Manager at SANRAL. I'm trying to show my face. There's my face. Right, great. So as we're going to continue to just give the update, I think you will see some of, obviously, the line item, that some things that you've possibly seen on the media over the past few days. We had planned this before this media splash or barking spider that you've seen all over the place, in terms of just obviously doing our annual engagement and just update in terms of where we are as a company and what we're planning and where we're going, right? So obviously some of the information is well, obviously not correct, but I think it is only befitting that we give you all the details as things sit now. So as far as the funding updates, so it has been public knowledge that we had engaged through Goldman Sachs, the MEGA, which is the World Bank facility, World Bank guaranteed facility, looking at possible funding for certain projects. Also in the same breath, we also engaged with the BRICS Bank, known as New Development Bank, for some specific project funding. Obviously, that was subjected to the Treasury approval, which would have to be concurred by the then Minister of Finance, Mr. Tito Mboweni. So obviously there's been a to and fro, and obviously with regards to the lack of certainty on the tolling front, specifically emanating from the about 200 kilometers of e-tolls, which I think the full road network that we manage directly and on the toll side is about just under 1,700 kilometers. So obviously that has kind of put a bit of a twist, even politically and operationally, in terms of how we fund obviously the toll networks. Obviously, there was a strong insistence from the Minister of Finance that the user pay principle is the standard, and we should continue with it. But of the funding applications we did with the other entities, the due diligence was done. Obviously, those were bankable projects. They were shovel ready, and the big issue was obviously around about the policy in terms of funding road infrastructure and basically the whole transport sector. So I think that not that necessarily that the Treasury cancelled or blocked the deal, but I think there was an issue that, look, we can't have two processes going in parallel while we don't really know what will be the outcome of the other one, because the other one somewhat preempts what the outcome would be. So the funding from the MEGA facility was not utilized. The funding from the NDB through SANRAL was not drawn down. So obviously we have also engaged DBSA, which is basically a similar concept. So obviously till there's a bit of certainty around at least having a view from the Ministry of Finance, then maybe there should be direction. And I think the Minister of Transport last week quoted that the announcement will be made, not that the decision has been reached, but the announcement will be made obviously in Feb. That we wait to also see. We don't have any insider information in case you thought of asking us about that in the Q&A session. So as far as using our DMTN program, we have used 3.7, or we have funded 3.7 billion through private placements this current year. And obviously we still have quite a bit of headroom, which I'll go into a bit later, but we've still received quite decent support in the market. We have also approached the National Treasury to obviously allocate us a bit more funding for the toll portfolio, obviously to cater for the lack of collections. The current year, they have allocated 3.25 billion, excluding VAT, for the toll segment. So that we have been actively pursuing that aspect of the funding, but also noticing that the way in which it's been done over the few years has been a bit of, I would call it problematic in the long run, because it has been just purely earmarking the funds from the non-toll to the toll. Obviously, in the long term, we see that having a capability of undermining the non-toll network, which I think our engagements in the past few months has been slightly different, to say, look, while we are open to using some of the funding because we are running up quite a bit of large cash balances, we would like that the allocation to be more direct, or even if we utilize the funding from the non-toll section, we would like that section to be reimbursed, because that is now going to, in a long time, question the quality of our non-toll network. So that is, I think, one of the key discussions we've been having with NT and DOT. But obviously, the big ticket would be a resolution on GFIP. But I think that is kind of the most important thing, or the most important decision that will be reached, which gives us better direction in terms of which direction we're going. Next slide, please. So when you look at our redemption schedule, if you look at the ILBs, they've been kind of reevaluated to redemption. Obviously, depending on how aggressive you are with the inflation assumption, you will roughly land up somewhere closer to where we are. So in the 22-23, the upcoming financial year, we have quite a bit of redemptions coming through. We have the HWFs 11, 12, and 13s. And then we have the NRA 22, which is through the 15 billion DMTN program, which is unguaranteed. So we have about 7.27, roughly 7.3 billion coming due in the 22-23 financial year. We are cash positive on the toll portfolio till the end of September 2022, which obviously we would need to do a bit of funding. But that being said, that cash positive, obviously, it also includes some of the expected redemptions. Effectively, if we do roll those redemptions over or do a direct switch, that somewhat frees up the cash on that specific point. And in the year after that, you see we've got quite a big chunk of ILBs coming due. I think their nominal value is about 3.8, just under 3.9 billion. Obviously, revaluated, it takes up to around about the 11 billion mark, depending, give or take, depending on what your inflation assumption you have there is. So we do have quite a bit of funding pressures to meet some of those debt commitments. And we continue, obviously, to engage with the market participants and also engage with DOT and NT, obviously, on a more permanent solution to how we manage our funding. And you would see that to the 22-23 would actually be the year in which all the three floating rate notes are coming due. And we are constantly in discussions, obviously, with the different stakeholders and just trying to do a market sounding to see to what degree is there appetite of new floaters to roll over some of those floaters and things like the tenure, what is the size. And as things sit, I think the current size of these ones is about 4.65 billion. So we are obviously currently engaging and just trying to see what is the most viable solution to be able to manage that refinancing that is coming due in the 22-23 financial year. Next slide, please. So just to give a breakdown, as at the end of, actually on the 26th of November, this was the figures as we had in terms of the headroom that we have in terms of the borrowing. So under the 31.9 billion guarantee program, we have about 4.8 billion available that we can still tap into. So in case you're interested in doing a private placement, please feel free to reach out to me and Philip. Under the SZ guarantees, which is called the old guarantee, the founding guarantee when SANRAL was founded, we have about 759 million that we could utilize there. And under the 15 billion DMTN program, which is not guaranteed, we have 5.75 roughly billion that we could utilize there. Obviously, the pricing is not really ideal, and I think the demand is, well, which I think there's a relationship there. The demand has really not been as good as we would like it to be, which you would see we've effectively stayed quite away from trying to utilize that portion of the funding before we effectively, get ourselves in a debt trap. Next slide, please. So this is giving more of a detailed breakdown in terms of the nominal values of the bonds that are coming due. As I said, you would see that the three, floaters that are coming due in the 22-23, you would see the values there, and obviously the NRAs. The NRAs is the unguaranteed. You'd see the CPI ones that are also coming due. Those are denoted in nominal there, which is what I said. They're going to be a difference, obviously, to the curve that we presented earlier, because we kind of try and project what inflation will do till the point of redemption. But it gives you kind of the overall nominal exposure of where SANRAL sits. Next slide, please. Obviously, with the market dynamics, we do take quite a close look in terms of what is happening, who's buying our paper. And I did a comparison from the time I arrived, which is about November last year, and I looked at the holdings as of December of last year and obviously end of November, just trying to see the trajectory and the pattern of, also what is happening in the market, who's buying the paper. Obviously, there's been a lot of stuff that has happened since. There's been the riots, which would obviously have an impact in terms of, the insurance side of things. There's been quite a lot of stuff that has been moving, but I think we've just been trying to pay careful attention to who's the ultimate buyers of our paper and what has been the trajectory. And I think it also helps us to assess the level of confidence and the level of appetite and where it's coming from as far as the SANRAL paper is concerned. Next slide, please. So this actually just looks at the difference between December 2020 and November 2021, just trying to see, who's buying up our paper. The foreign sector is actually the weird one, which I think December 2020, it was about 0.6. Now it's moved to about 2.5. We obviously interrogate that data quite, aggressively to ensure that there isn't any reporting errors there. The monetary sector, you'd see that monetary institutions, they have picked up a bit on them. Obviously, long-term insurance and official pension funds, especially on the pension funds, we are obviously quite, worried, and we're looking at in detail to say what is happening. Obviously, there's been a few maybe one very big pension fund, which has been obviously going through some changes, but I think that shows even in our numbers. And as we continue to assess that and assess our investor base, those are some of the things we look at into detail. Next slide, please. Oh, I think that's the end. All right. So look, I think we'll open up for questions, but as far as the funding is concerned, that is the breakdown, and we are still, there's still appetite for us to do some funding. There is obviously very strong support from the national government, and I think it makes it easier as things sit. Not that it's an ideal situation to have such large cash balances on the non-toll side, but I think it makes the transition to, rands and cents of the support easier as far as supporting the toll side of the portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Sia, and the SANRAL management team for that excellent presentation. So as Sia has said, we can open up for questions. I don't think there's any questions I don't see any questions in the chat box. So if anyone can raise their hand or post in the chat box, please.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. We see there is one. Do you see it here?
Yeah, I see it from Stembiso. So
Yeah.
what has been the impact on the cost of funding given the alignment of the investor base? It's actually been quite an interesting, assessment when you look at the cost of funding. Whereas if you would have asked me what would be the impact 3-4 years ago, I would have said it would have worsened the spread. But I think because of the market and where it is and so many things moving, and obviously this global turmoil that is happening, we've actually seen quite a bit of narrowing in the spread in some of the transactions we've done, which is, I don't know if I should call it an anomaly or that is the new normal, but the impact has been actually quite the inverse of what I would have expected it to be, which I would have expected it to widen quite substantially, as you would have seen even in national government auctions. When there is certain big pension funds that are not available in the auction, the spread, rises quite drastically. But I think that this has taken us by surprise, but we obviously do continue and accept whatever market movement since it's in our favor. But there has been quite an interesting shift downwards, which possibly it's more to do with market sentiment rather than the specific investors.
Thanks for that, Sia. There's another question from Ulonda. It's for Andrew.
Right, in terms of the rand value of projects that were disrupted by community unrest, it is again, the project weren't stopped, they were just delayed, but it affected quite a number of our projects. Let me show you this slide again, just that we can see the quantity of that. So this is when the issues came into effect. So you can see that the quantity is roughly in this magnitude in terms of how it has delayed our project spending. I don't have an exact value for you offhand, but I think that might give you some. Hope that gives you some idea in terms of the quantity or the order of magnitude.
Thanks for that, Andrew. See, there's a question from Duncan. Based on your projections, based on the projections, you intend using surplus cash quite aggressively on your project pipeline. How then do you intend to cover the debt maturities in 2022, 2023, and especially 2023 and 2024? So, yeah.
Right. So Duncan, I think you would have seen that there's quite a big segregation between toll and non-toll. And possibly, I think the projections you're referring to utilizing the cash quite aggressively would be on the non-toll section. So obviously, the toll section has been somewhat hindered in terms of executing projects. And as we said, look, the 3.25 billion ex-VAT was for this year. And obviously, if there is no firm decision taken as far as the GFB is concerned, we will obviously engage with our parent departments in terms of helping us resolve the funding impasse. And we do continue to have obviously revenue coming through from the other sources, but it's obviously not sufficient. Thus, you would see when we do the application, we would state that, look, this is how much we would have lost, and this is how much we need to obviously cover some of the operations on the toll side. So there is quite a clear legislative segregation between toll and non-toll. So even you'd see that even the allowance we've been given to take some money from the non-toll to toll, it has to be expressed. So there's that segregation there. So obviously with that, we are still going to engage with NT and DOT, obviously assuming that the decision is not reached. But if the decision is reached or announced in February, as indicated by the Minister of Transport, I think possibly the conversation will be slightly different, as it will open up a different tune, obviously, in terms of how we look at funding. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sia. There's another question from Olga. When do you expect the ongoing 18-month impasse with NT to be resolved? And if not resolved, how likely is the implementation of your project plans?
Sorry, impasse in what sense?
So impasse with NT, impasse with National Treasury. I'm not sure.
Yeah, sorry, it's Olga here. It was on the slide, I think, that Andrew showed about the definition of the contractors. He went through the slide quite quickly, so I can't recall exactly, but he mentioned an 18-month impasse with Treasury on some definition that delayed the implementation of projects.
Right. Thanks. That impasse has been resolved, and we are now putting out tenders as quickly as what we can, as much as our capacity allows it, to basically catch up with that spending. I mean, I can go into more details of what the impasse was, but perhaps that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
And we have another question from Mulonda. Can you provide an expected timeline for the appointment of a new permanent CEO?
Londa, I think, I mean, you'd know that obviously in government there's processes. The board has obviously initiated the recruitment process, and they have their own deadlines, which actually I think they have met them as far as submitting names to the Department of Transport, of which then the Minister of Transport, I believe, is the one who appoints the CEO. In terms of the exact timelines, we don't have any formal communicated timelines, but obviously we would have had some internal indications in terms of, what the board needs to do, and anything beyond that, I don't think we can set a deadline or a timeline for the minister to act. I mean, if we had that power, we would have told him when to announce on it also.
Thanks for that, Sia. Then we have a question from Liam Dawson. How sensitive is your revenue to Transnet successfully improving its rail operations? Additionally, what are your thoughts on how effective Transnet will be at drawing freight back to their operations?
I'll leave the last part to Andrew and Tumsani. Yeah. So obviously there's actually quite a very strong relationship between the weight of the freight on the road and the cost aspect of that, which basically, because then when you have less trucks which are causing more damage to the road being removed from the road effectively, you are actually reducing your expenditure line base. So even though your revenue could slightly reduce, but also the impact on your expenditure lines, I think, would be quite impacted quite significantly, which effectively, balances out. But I think I'll open up. I won't open speculations in terms of our thoughts on Transnet. It's our sister entity, and I don't think we'd want to go down that rat hole. Tumsani and Andrew?
If I can come in there, I think there's certain freight that makes sense to be moved by rail. But in terms of manufacturing processes, people have moved to the concept of just-in-time manufacturing. So no longer do you order an entire trainload of nuts and bolts and you keep it in a warehouse, and you draw down on that stock until you've used it up, and then you order a big bulk delivery. You're having small deliveries on a regular basis, so you don't have these major warehouse storage keeping inventory, as it were. So, and that type of manufacturing doesn't really lend itself well to trains. Trains do well on big bulk deliveries rather than small, little regular deliveries, and that's where a lot of road freight is going to be, is being used, and because of how industries have changed. So yes, I think the moving coal or iron ore, great, please move it by rail, but in terms of a lot of other manufacturing and other deliveries, there's a limited amount that rail can actually participate in that type of market or economy. So that's, and as he has pointed out, the maintenance required on the road would decrease because it's directly correlated to the number of E80s or standard equivalent 80 kilonewton axles. So the lower the truck volumes, you get a big reduction in maintenance costs.
Thank you for that answer, gentlemen. We have another question from Londa. Andrew, this one is for you. Can you please unpack the impasse that was referred to earlier? Right.
So we're obviously, as a state-owned entity, we're governed by the procurement regulations that National Treasury publishes, and one of the regulations that was passed was in terms of there's a certain requirement for subcontracting on large projects, and those subcontracting arrangements must be in place at the close of the main tender. And the impasse was really around the definition of local. So the requirement said that the subcontractors must be local. Now, there was the definition of does local mean from my suburb? Does it mean from my municipality? Does it mean from my province? Does it mean from South Africa? And the intention from National Treasury was that it was of first sorting that out took time, and then over and above that, the National Treasury's definition was of so the subcontractors being South African companies, but the communities interpreted that as being much more from their local areas, and so if a subcontractor from the next town was appointed, there was great unhappiness about this, and therefore there was site stoppages and protest action, and some of it unfortunately quite violent, and that unfortunately put quite a long stop and delay in a lot of projects while that was sorted out. And unfortunately, we're still seeing the waves of that in some cases, but we are addressing that by having project liaison committees, or making more use of them to engage with the public and engage with the communities so that there is the understanding, and that we also have a 3-month mobilization period after appointment of the main contractor for the subcontracting to be finalized. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Andrew. On the financial feasibility that has been done on potential toll routes, does this analysis include a user affordability assessment, or does it only consider traffic volumes?
Right. So in that case, it absolutely does include affordability. So we do the full life cycle projection, and the traffic. There's obviously the traffic volumes, but by implementing toll, that is a negative in terms of the traffic attraction. So that would, so you might see traffic being attracted to the route because there's a better level of service, offering faster travel times or cost, time savings, fuel savings, those type of savings. But then by implementing toll, there's then a reduction in traffic because people are opposed to paying the extra fee and would rather take a different route. And so that those traffic impacts are definitely taken into account in terms of affordability. It's key. You can't leave those out.
Thanks, Andrew. We have a question from Olga. Can you give us some indication of the degree of SANRAL involvement in the GFIP discussions at Cabinet and with NT? Are you at the table when this matter and options are being discussed? Who is the final decision maker? Is it the Department of Transport, NT, Cabinet, or someone else? Can you outline some of the blockages and options under discussion? Given how long this issue has been going on for, how confident are you that there will be a resolution in February 2022?
I will open and hand over to Mr. Maluleke. Look, so obviously SANRAL is involved. The costing aspect of it, the different options that have been submitted, it's there, and obviously it's two. So there is basically two extremes, right? It's either one, we are given the mandate to collect, and obviously the powers, the whipping stick to go collect, or the other very far end where it is completely scrapped, then just government needs to give us the money, and there's obviously a couple of other 100 iterations somewhere in between, which is some form of a hybrid model that would need to be considered. But look, the SANRAL is involved in terms of who makes the final decision. I think the Minister of Transport has indicated that this matter sits in front of Cabinet, and I think for a very critical reason, because the decision on this doesn't only affect one department. It affects other departments. It affects other processes in government. So there isn't a view to say that maybe the announcement or the pronouncement would be made by the Department of Transport in terms of operationalizing it. But if there is some form of hybrid, or there is some funds that need to be allocated or additional allocation, they would have to go through this normal appropriations process and so on, which then directly affects National Treasury. So it's not a very clear-cut answer to say this person X is responsible, but I think it's taking into account what the implication of any decision, regardless whether it's far left, far right, or somewhere in between, means for the general government, operations, and obviously the finances of the country and of SANRAL as an entity. On the confidence, that will be pure speculation, and I'll hand over to Mr. Maluleke. I don't want to. I do have a view, but I'm a very optimistic person. I don't care whether the glass is half full or half empty. If I'm thirsty, I drink whatever is in the glass. Mr. Maluleke.
I see. I think you explained it well around the e-tolls, but on whether or not there will be an announcement during the budget speech in February, we can't guarantee that because we have seen so many times that the Minister of Transport has said that in 2 weeks' time there'll be an announcement, before August there'll be an announcement, that it never happened. So we just have to wait and see, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you for that answer, gentlemen. And then we have another question from Tembiso. Will SANRAL require an increase on its guarantee in the short to medium term, given its CapEx program, current nominal guarantee headroom, and relatively small upcoming nominal redemptions?
Yeah, look, Tembiso, it's quite an interesting balancing act. First, we would like a resolution on GIF. That would be greatly appreciated. But obviously, in terms of SANRAL, executing some of the projects, that even GIFIB was, I believe, phase 1. There's still a couple of more phases which were planned onto that. So there is obviously quite a lot of other, expansion programs or projects that SANRAL would like to partake in to greatly improve the road networks and the infrastructure of the current road network. So inevitably, in the long run, assuming that there is a very clear direction on the funding of the toll roads or the funding policy on roads, depending on which direction it would go, obviously, if we're going, user pay principle, market funds, and so on, then yes, we would need, obviously, some expansion, because obviously the mandate or the amount of work that would need to be done and the capital that would require to be raised will be slightly higher. But obviously, when there is still uncertainty of what the direction is. So just to give an example, if you would take it back to we scrap tolling. Not that it's a position, but I'm just giving an example to say we scrap tolling. We use the fuel levy to fund the roads. Obviously, then we'll then no longer need to get additional guarantees or borrowing limits, because effectively we wouldn't have to borrow. So a lot of it hangs in the policy discussions and obviously the final resolution to say which direction we're going, and then that's going to obviously determine the degree of which we will need any other borrowing limits and / borrowing guarantees going forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that answer, Sia. Andrew, another question for you from Olga. One of your slides indicated future expenditure, the number being somewhere between 800 and 1 billion rand for community development or community engagement. She didn't remember the exact term. Please, can you give more detail on this expenditure item and how the spending procurement decisions will be made?
Right. So this is okay. So in going back to the community issues, one of the strategies of SANRAL is to empower and to kind of to offer sort of training and mentorship for smaller contractors. And so with a large project, we would then issue a community development project. So this would give further opportunities to subcontractors who might not necessarily have the skills or the capital for big enough equipment, or things of that nature. But with a big project, for example, perhaps the sidewalks for pedestrians along the other side of the street are constructed, or access roads, leading up to the interchanges, so that the traffic can get to the interchange to get onto the main road. Those projects are then included to sort of bulk up the experience and the capability of those subcontractors and give further employment opportunities. Let me share the slide. I think it was here the community development values are given for toll. And then non-toll. So those really go hand in hand as sort of support projects to our major, our larger construction or maintenance projects. So it's also part of overcoming that the community stoppages, but also part of empowering the industry so that when we do go do another construction project in that area, there are subcontractors who have the experience to participate in the main contract as well. Hope that answers.
Yeah, Andrew, I don't know if maybe you're the right person to answer this, but in terms of, what steps are followed, if any, to be sure that there are no like procurement irregularities in the allocation of this work. Do you have an outline of that, please?
Right. So I'm not involved with that directly, but I think the standard procurement procedures are followed. So it's still open tender. The individuals must still submit or not the individuals, the subcontractors must still submit a competitive bid. They're evaluated in the same way. So it's not the standard procedures are followed. And really, that even from tendering, bidding, the contractual side, all the way through to construction and actual delivery of the final product, that those even on the community projects, that those subcontractors are taken through that whole process, in that they get the experience not just of construction, but even the tendering and bidding and how bids are evaluated.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Thank you for that, Andrew. So it looks like there are no more questions in the chat box. So is there any more questions? Or just look out for any hands. Okay, we had originally allocated 90 minutes for this, but it's 5 minutes to 10. So I believe we can close up this investor update. So that brings us to the end of it. I'd like to thank the SANRAL management team for providing the presentation. I'd also like to thank investors for attending, and also thank you for all your questions, and thank you for the engagement. Any questions that we haven't responded to, I believe we have responded to all of them, but if there are any that we haven't, they will receive a written response. Thank you to everybody, and yes, we can close this call now. Thank you.